And welcome back to Who Would Win. Today's Who Would Win comes to us from Sosuke Aizen. We'll ask the question, who would win a fight? Lord Death from Soul Reader versus Baraggan Louisenbairn from Bleach. Lord Death is literally once referred to as God. He's death. He is basically death itself. And as such, he's arguably the strongest character in the entire series. He's powerful enough. His whole power is powerful enough to soul is powerful enough to cover or encompass all of the Death City, and is far larger than those who possess even a mighty soul. Even a portion of his soul wavelength was able to destroy a very large, powerful monster. His original form was something more akin to like spiky, evil lookingness. But he's a shapeshifter capable of changing from cloak to weapon form. He has a frightening form, a kid-friendly form. His Reaper powers are vast, including creation powers. He was capable of creating... Death was able to create the new world, including its inhabitants and cosmology, while basing it off of the old world. This implies he has, like, creationary powers, but on a planetary scale. That's serious levels of power right there. He has some interaction with mirrors. He's capable of sealing... capable of holding individuals as powerful as Kishin. He is also able to create a bag made up of Azura's skin in order to contain his body. It's soul wavelength. Don't really know what soul wavelength really is, honestly. Actually, hold on. Soul wavelength. Soul wavelength, simply known as wavelength, is the sound / rhythm of one's soul. It's the part of soul which is invisible to both the naked eye and the soul perception visually, although it can be sensed. Its representation in the series is often like that of cogs or in a machine due to the importance of misers and weapons being on each other's wavelengths. Okay, so that's what your soul wavelength is. Interesting. His wavelength is huge, basically referred to as the power of God, and such guards specifically as such. His wavelength destruction power is a level at which Death the Kid, using a portion of it, as we said, was able to defeat something like a large horror dragon and Noah Greed in a single attack. He has something called Madness Aura, considering it to be the true power of a Reaper. This form of madness is an intense force capable of suppressing human emotion, leaving only a mechanical cycle of life and death. Effectively, the opposite of Madness Sphere is capable of countering the expense of human emotion. Due to his faith in humanity, Death doesn't voluntarily use this force. Wavelength control. He has proficient level of control over his own soul wavelength. Hand-to-hand combat. He is a skilled hand-to-hand user. Reaper physiology. He has mass regeneration. He regenerated his body seconds after having a hole drilled through it. High physical abilities, capable of possessing physical abilities to make him more than a match for someone like Azura, capable of physically chopping him a distance away with his strength alone, surviving being skewered by Kishin. He managed to survive Lost Island's explosion caused by a character's demolition of Demon Tool facility. He is immortal. A true Reaper. He's immortal and lived for 800 years. It is possible that his immortality is similar to Azura's, who inherited his immortality from Death the Kid, from Death due to being an embodiment of fears and fear itself as a result of it. Now, I spoke about this in the last time I had this character when I had him up against Null. I call this something like conceptual immortality or embodiment immortality. When you are the embodiment of a concept, as long as that concept exists, you cannot die. Hence being the embodiment of fear, as long as the concept of fear exists, fear itself exists, you will not die. You could be brought to near death, but as long as fear exists in the world, you will not die. Now, same instance of death. Death is a natural part of the cycle of life, and therefore he, in theory, will never die, theoretically. He is also highly intelligent, has spatial sense, but due to the sealing of Azura being rooted to his soul, he is unable to travel beyond the realm of his own soul, which encompasses the entire Death City. For Death to move, it would require the movement of the entire city itself, even if Azura were released. In addition, he also doubted his own power to finish off Azura, but this is most likely due to his own immortality. When Azura suddenly fired a powerful blast from something, Death took the impact with his own body and would certainly been killed. Let me read that again. It forced Death to protect them with his body, as they would have certainly been killed. And it was shown that if caught off guard and forced to take a sufficient powerful enough attack, he could be incapacitated and critically injured. But again, he more or less has true immortality in that sense. In the sense of being death itself. And as long as death exists, you win. Now, if you can remove the concept of death from the world, there's no longer death existing in the world, well, then he no longer has that immortality. Same concept with fear. The question would also then be, if you were to eliminate fear from the world, let's just say Infinity Gauntlet style, if you eliminate fear from the world, and then kill said individual who had a conceptual immortality based around fear, just incinerate his body down to non-existence. The existence erasure, by the way, would be different than killing him. Yeah, if you were to do that, would they come back to life? That, I don't think so if you erase their entire existence. Anyway, Baraggan Louisenbairn was the second as number 2 Espada under Sosuke Aizen. He was the former king of Hueco Mundo, and as such, he is a highly powerful Vasta Lordis, if I believe. We assume he's a Vasta Lorde. As such, he has extreme physical strength. He has immense speed as well. He's a Sonido expert, capable of keeping up with the likes of someone like Soifon, who is also Sonido expert. Those are faster than light movements right there, Sonido, even on the base level. And he is clearly not at base level. But his real abilities came from his extra abilities. He had, as far as I know, he had a Hiaro, which is armor skin. But he had in his sealed form, his suppressed form, his basic form, he had a time dilation field that no matter who got near him, no matter how fast they were moving, he was able to slow down their movements and as such dodge or catch them in combat. He could also age anything he touched up to the point where it would become brittle or whatever. So he's extremely hard to hit just in base form. Then when you get into his release, Rot Arrogante, his giant battle axe Zanpakuto turns him into, in essence, the Grim Reaper. In this, he has his main ability known as Respira. Respira basically releases a miasma, which is like a gaseous attack. Anything it touched rotted away into nothingness. Like it just rotted. In fact, let me get that up just to be certain on how they describe that. 1 second here. Baraggan Louisenbairn. Yeah, these guys always had like some really good names. Baraggan Louisenbairn. Let's see now. His Arrogante, his Respira. Sorry, not his Arrogante. His Respira. He also was a keen intellect at being so old. He was skilled with his axe, as far as we can tell. He had, like I said, age acceleration and time dilation field. His Respira. Let's see. Baraggan controls speed, purposely releasing it. Person releasing it. Let's see. Radiating outward, it erots anything comes in contact with it. It moved fast enough to strike Soifon. Then to escape. Miasma decayed the skin and the arm until only shreds of cloth left, and her skeletal arms were left behind. Even after the attack, the deterioration continued until the affected arm was amputated. He was able to destroy a keto cage. He explained the aspect of all things living. Everything living dies eventually. Things which they create eventually die as well. And then he can also just turn his Respira essentially into a giant axe. He creates a giant axe, but it's believed to just be made of Respira. He basically can swing his Respira by swinging the axe as well. Now, his one real weakness is that he was not immune to his own ability. He had some way to counter his own ability on the outside, but when he was teleported on his inside, he just rotted from the inside out. He is exceptional, and there doesn't seem to be any limit to what he can rot. Everything that he came in contact with just rotted away. In theory, if he wanted to just attack the Earth and just he could rot away the entire Earth if he really wanted to. So the question is, in a fight between these Reapers, who wins? This is kind of tricky because on a power scale, Respira is a pretty hacked ability. But in Bleach, it's all about Riazzo. The reason Aizen never feared him is because he was just stronger than Baraggan by a huge margin. So his Respira, he could just negate it. I don't think Death from Soul Eater is as strong as Aizen. He doesn't have that level of power in all truth. His power seems to be able to encompass an entire city, but at the same time, he was able to recreate an entire world. So that puts his power probably at its peak on a planetary level. But as I stated, with Respira, you probably could just rot the planet away too. It's very likely that because they were fighting in a fake Karakura town, they weren't fighting in the real Karakura town. So their powers were contained in there. It's cited in Bleach that captain level and lieutenant level fighters suppress their powers to not influence the real world too much. It's very likely that high level, captain level fighters in the world of Bleach are planetary in nature in terms of how much power they could release and destroy. Or at the very minimum, they could wreak serious havoc on the planet. And Baraggan was definitely a captain level fighter. So these two are probably on relatively even footing, with Lord Death at his peak maybe outclassing Baraggan to some degree. Because he actually had to... Now, to be fair, it's stated he created the new world. They didn't say he created the new planet. The world is a loose concept. You could destroy the world. But the world doesn't necessarily mean the planet. The world just means everything that exists to create the world we have. The world we have is a vast thing, but it doesn't necessarily mean the planet we have. So it's a very different... Now, you can mean planetary when you say world, but it doesn't necessarily always mean planetary when you say world, if that makes any sense. So it's tough because I don't know if they're implying that Death the Kid created the world as the planet, or Death the Kid. Lord Death created the world in terms of the planet. My guess might be yes, because if that implies the world and the moon itself, that might be the same thing. And he created the moon too. So maybe that is the case. He created the whole planet. Either way, power-wise, I think in terms of his actual level of power, Death Lord Death, I think he probably does not eclipse, but he does if Baraggan's here, Lord Death's probably up here. Not a huge margin of difference. If we're looking at number scale, let's say just Baraggan's a 5, Lord Death's probably a 7.5 to 8. So he's not a full double Baraggan's power, but he's extremely... I think he does have an advantage over him in terms of straight power. Not enough that he might be immune to the Respira, but enough that he could probably keep it at bay. Problem for Death is he's limited to the bounds of where he is. He's limited to the city. And the question then becomes, what happens to the city if the city is destroyed? Baraggan could just destroy the city, and then what happens there? Is he completely is he released, or is he screwed? Something happens where he's now I'm suffering. So I don't know for certain on that. What I do know is though that Baraggan's time manipulation, even in base form, would be very difficult for Death to really do much against, because we saw how we could deal with someone who can move at soy phone speed, who's one of the fastest in the 13 Courtyard squad. We saw how fast we saw I could handle some of her speed, but I don't know if Lord Death would be faster than that. And even then, it doesn't really matter because the time dilation really is able to work on anyone super fast. You can't beat Baraggan with just sheer speed. He'll just slow you down. And then he can try to age up Lord Death. Now, I think that would be a mistake on Baraggan's part. The minute he tries to age up, he's I've existed for 800 years. You really think you're going to age me up? I'm Death. And just slices Baraggan, who actually maybe takes a hit and just Rot arrogante. I am the Lord of Oikomundo, its rightful king. You think you can just you think you are powerful enough to take me on? You call yourself the embodiment of death. I'll show you the embodiment of death. Respira. And that ultimately leads to the question: is Lord Death immune to the Respira, being death and all that? As we saw, we saw the concept of death with Soul Reapers. Soul Reapers are Reapers. But is that enough to kill him? So here's the thing. I don't think he's immune to Respira. But I think he would be resistant enough to be able to just survive it. He could be vastly injured by it, but I think he'd be able to survive it. And that would lead just to a lot of now a back and forth fight. Who's going to tire out first? Baraggan or Lord Death? Lord Death could throw out attacks. Baraggan could just respire them. Although things like sound are probably immune to or can probably bypass because there's no real physical mass to that. Like respire is not like clearly rotting away the air or anything like that. So theoretically, wind, fire, anything that doesn't have really a physical form or like spiritual based energy, in theory, could be immune to it. But regardless, I do think Death. I think ultimately, in terms of like long-term fighting, Death is probably going because we've seen Leech characters have limitations. Even Arankars have limitations, and they tire out. Death, from what we can tell, doesn't necessarily have that. It does have limitations, but those limitations seem to be a lot more pronounced and higher. I think it'd be a drawn-out fight. These two would be going back and forth for a while, but ultimately, without that time dilation field, because as far as we know, he didn't have the time dilation field when he goes into his resurrection, Baraggan. So I think he loses that in favor of his Respira. Because if he had both, then honestly, there's not much Death can do against Baraggan at that point. But at that point, I think, but if he doesn't have that, which again, there's no indication he had that in his release form, I think Death, I keep saying, I want to say Death, Lord Death is ultimately going to win this by a sheer battle of attrition. Again, though, there is the catch-22 of we don't know what would happen if you destroyed the city Death encompasses, his soul, because he can't leave that spot. Even if you destroy the city, maybe that whole area is still, he's still stuck there. So my money, though, is going to go on Lord Death. And it really just comes down to the concept of the embodiment immortality, the conceptual immortality that he apparently has. And the idea that Baraggan's Respira I don't think erases anything from existence. It just rots things away. Now, yeah, as far as I can tell, it's not described as, or rotting things out of existence. It's just described as, rotting things down until there's nothing left. Now, that might not mean that, like, on the scientific side, matter cannot be destroyed or created. It can just change forms. Maybe it just changes form and just goes back to like the basis elements. But in Bleach, we do know there's things like erasing existence. Yamamoto's like Bankai, for instance, gets so hot, it just erases existence. So existence erasure exists in Bleach. So I will say this, long-term fight. If Respira does not erase the existence of things, Death will win this in a long battle of attrition. If Respira erases the existence of things, and he basically just encompasses Death overall and rots Death away, then Baraggan wins. Because even though it's conceptual immortality, immortality doesn't work when it comes to existence erasure. Existence erasure is a completely separate ability. So until it can be proven one way or the other, because again, I'm on like the wiki right now for Baraggan, like the fandom, and the fandom's like pretty damn accurate. There is no evidence to suggest it was, nor it wasn't, existence erasure. It was just rotting. So right now I'm going towards it's not, but again, you have my answer if it is. Anyway, that's how I think this fight would break down. Let me know if you think differently, and if you do, that's cool. Let me know in the comments below why. Until then, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, share, subscribe. As always, if you want us to review something, put in the comments below. Let us know. I use Who would win, Star Wars, Super Magic, what if anything to do with the channel. Put that in the comments below, and I'll get to that at some point. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.